Okay, good morning everyone. Very welcome to my talk. It's very surprising to me to see so many people at a frog talk, and hopefully I'll show you guys why that is. Okay, so yeah, thank you so much for showing interest and being here today. It warms my heart. But without further ado, let's get going. So today I'll be talking to you about frogs. Okay, the title of my talk being Green is Not Easy, Frogs of Nature's Valley. And the idea of what I'll be talking to you today is I want to give you a message to take home with a little bit of a focus on the biodiversity, specifically South Africa, but more focused on Nature's Valley. All right, and then going on, I'd like to kind of convey to you guys the challenges that conservationists such as myself struggle with, specifically from a frog perspective. Okay? All right. And then with that, taking that into consideration, what I'm going to talk to you about, how you and I, as citizens and as scientists, can help for the benefit of frog conservation. All right. But first, a little bit about myself. Some of you might know who I am, but for those of you who don't, or for those of you who forgot, my name is Tiaan Botha. I've got a very nature-focused background. I started with just a normal bachelor's in science in zoology and biochemistry in 2019 and graduated in 2021. I moved on to do my honors in biodiversity and conservation ecology, and I finished that last year. And this year I started with my master's in environmental sciences, and I'm finishing that next year in 2024. Okay, and I'll focus, with this talk, or elaborate a little bit later on what that entails and what I'm contributing to conservation. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of introduce to you what a frog is, okay, or more specifically an amphibian. So amphibians is a class of vertebrates that people kind of generally refer to as amphibians. They are amphibious, as the name suggests. And in the case that you do believe in evolution, they are considered to be a very important link between the mammals or the higher vertebrates that we know of today, such as mammals, and completely aquatic fishes that roamed the earth, 530 million years ago. So with the emergence of amphibians, don't ask me what that amphibian is called, I don't know, but that specific specimen there is considered to be the first distinguishable amphibian, and being that kind of the custodian to a terrestrial landscape, it enabled vertebrates such as ourselves to explore the world that we know as a terrestrial life. Okay, and then as these amphibians kind of roamed the earth, they took on different shapes and sizes, and in the class of amphibia we get 3 orders. Okay, so I won't talk too much about that, but the 3 orders that we get are caecilians, which are worm amphibians. You guys can look that up, it's very interesting. We get chordata, which are salamanders, and we get anurans, which are frogs. And in South Africa, we only have anurans. We don't have salamanders, we don't have worm amphibians. Botswana has caecilians, but that's kind of where it stops. Okay, so as you can see, the different shapes and sizes are revealed to you a little bit more about how that is. You typically get your frogs, what you expect a frog to look like, which are the examples that I have here. So most of these pictures that you see today are from the valley, except this one. It's not from the valley, but you do get that specimen here. So most of these pictures are from the valley, just to kind of keep it relevant. Okay? Then you get, as you kind of go to more extreme side of things, you get frogs that actually change color, like the painted reed frog, believe it or not, the typical reed frog that we all so much love and keep us awake at night. Okay? It can change color depending on the temperature. Next we get different type of frogs that actually make nests. The leaf folder frog folds leaves, and the foam nest frogs makes like bubble clumps. Okay? All right? And then we get to the extreme end. Okay? We get frogs that look otherworldly, like the rain frog or the bullfrog or even the sand frogs. They look very strange. And then even within species, you get extreme variation. For example, this is the common river frog in one of the first slides. Look at the colors that you get with it. Or the dainty frog, or the painted reed frog. Just the extreme colors and variations and even sizes and even behaviors with frogs can vary significantly. Okay, so frogs are special, we know that. Just like most animals, they've got certain characteristics that distinguish them from others. For example, just as mammals have hair, have mammary glands, and is endothermic, frogs don't have mammary glands, don't have hair, and is ectothermic. That's a poor example, but I'm sure you get the point. So the most prominent thing is, okay, frogs jump. Not very significant in the kind of scientific world, but from a morphological perspective, they have well-adapted spines and hip bones to accommodate this movement. Next, vocalization, just like birds. This is also very interesting and very useful. So frogs use vocalization for different purposes, and I'll go into that a little bit later. And then habitat specificity, and also, which I'll get to a little bit later, is sensitivity to their environment. Being so niche specific and having very specific niche responsibilities also makes them, in some senses, very special and very valuable. Okay, and then next, a permeable skin. I don't know if you guys know this, but it's widely kind of known in conservation and in zoology that frogs have very permeable skin, and this is very important for their aquatic lifestyle. They use this to breathe and drink when they're submerged in water. Okay, which we also can utilize. I'll elaborate a little bit later. Okay, and then the dependence on water. So this is that you can kind of argue that every animal is dependent on water, but frogs again are very special. Without the presence of water, their tadpoles cannot successfully metamorphose into they're frogs, right? Which is again very important for the conservation side. Okay, and then finally a link in the food web. Okay, so just bear with me. I'll tell you a little bit later, but just the significance of them being there plays a crucial role in the trophic cycle of energy in an ecosystem. Okay, so and then I spoke about the utilization, right? So as scientists, we can kind of take advantage of this for the benefit of research and for the benefit of frogs. Okay, so vocalization of frogs. It's got a very specific and a very special evolutionary significance because only males in frogs use vocalization to make themselves known. Okay, this is again strange. I think the married couples can agree with me on this. Okay, so and then so we know that only males use it for specifically breeding. Okay, for territory acquisition and interaction with males and the acquisition of a mate. Okay, so and being so significant, every species has their own call. It's very unique. It's like a fingerprint basically, and as scientists we can use that for different reasons. So this is we call it a song meter. This one specifically is an SM4. And what we do with these is it's a method that we call passive acoustic monitoring, and we take advantage of the specific calls of frogs to do different kinds of research depending on how advanced it is or how intricate you want to get into the kind of research. But essentially, we put these song meters in the field, we listen to the sounds of the frogs, and we can get an idea of the population dynamics and species or presence or absence lists of the frogs that you get in the area. And then, so this SM4 produces a spectrogram like this, which can be visually analyzed to produce nominal data. And this is very basically the fundamental foundation of amphibian or frog research. Okay, and then habitat specificity. Okay, so because they're research or niche specialists, in some cases, when you are evaluating an environment, it's a good idea to look at the frogs that you can expect to find there. Because they've got permeable skin and because they are so dependent on their development in water, any change or the slightest change in the environment can lead to a fatal fate, okay, or just a bad time in general. Okay, So using that as a utility for conservation, we can look into changes in the environment for taking the frog's perspective, and we can see what's wrong because they utilize both aquatic and terrestrial habitats. And then the trophic significance. So we all know that frogs eat insects, and what eats a frog is birds and snakes, and they are an important link between those two classes, between the insects and between the higher vertebrates. So, and then that also, it's if you don't have your frogs in your system, there's a critical imbalance of the energy or the carbon flow between your microorganisms, such as fungus or bacteria, and a little bit higher to smaller invertebrates, to larger systems such as grasslands, forests, and wetlands. And then threats. Okay, so there are various different threats that an amphibian can experience. Some people argue that the simple existence and morphology, ecology, and biology of a frog in the Anthropocene can lead to their extinction. They are not designed to live in a world where humans are, and that's a problem. So, in my opinion, it's a very good idea to assume that there's no single factor, humans, that leads to the result of amphibian extinction. And there's different, human and natural causes, such as habitat loss, UV radiation, climate change, alien invasive species, chemical misuse, or natural or induced mutations. And it's very difficult to kind of pinpoint which cause is, or which threat is the leading cause for frog species decline, or is it that obvious, or not obvious, all right? Okay, so now that you know what a frog is and who a frog is and why a frog is, I can kind of take you into the background of what I'm doing. So my master's here it's got 3 focuses. The one which is my flagship study is taking people perceptions into consideration when looking at or trying to conserve frogs. So most of you that come from the valley, you might be a participant of that study. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to point the people out, okay? But I'm pretty sure you're interested to see the results that I've found. The next is biodiversity, which I misspelled. I'm sorry about that. Just taking a look into the Nature's Valleys biodiversity, what type of frogs we find, and then kind of diving a little bit deeper in and looking at, okay, why or where do which species occur? Again, taking their niche specificity into consideration. And then finally, there's a third purpose, which I'd like to contribute to literature by looking at a heavily understudied endangered species known as the Knysna leaf-folding frog. All right. Okay, so the social study, it's fortunately under review. It's going to be published very soon. So I just wanted to inform you this is a presentation that I gave at the Oppenheimer Research Conference, which not very relevant to this, but okay, so the introduction to my social study. All right, so there's a few things that need to be taken into consideration when doing social studies, right? So why I'm so impressed to see so many people here is because in general frogs are hated by people. People don't like frogs, and that's the sad truth. It's an exception for Nature's Valley residents, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But the cultural setting of South Africa and the kind of rural theme that this country has, being so intertwined with nature, the people have very interesting views and behaviors towards frogs. Right, so taking people's perceptions, behaviors, intentions, those things into consideration has been considered to be a very important step in conservation, because it's no longer keeping people and nature apart. There is place for it, but there's a very important space for kind of working together with nature. And the purpose of this, or the kind of design of this study, is to look at a mixed methods research approach. So previously there has been research done on human perspectives and behaviors towards frogs, but taking a very specific and widely used route. And what I've done is taking a little bit of a detour into why people think like this. We know that people don't like frogs. We know it in South Africa, but why? And that's what I've done with this study. Okay, so the study area, Nature's Valley, I specifically looked at, or the crags basically, specifically looked at Kirland, Covey, and Nature's Valley, and I've got a handful of residents from each of those communities that participated in the study. All right, and then the design of the study, which makes it, in my opinion, pretty powerful, is a concurrent or embedded research approach. So this might be a little bit flying over your guys' head, but I'm going to try and simplify it for you guys. So when it comes to data gathering, I did it through a questionnaire, which has your simple, they call it a Likert scale. It's on a scale of 1 to 5. Do you agree or disagree with the statement that I'm saying? A very good example is, do you like frogs or you like frogs? And I'm going to ask the participant on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being completely agree, 1 being completely disagree. So that's the quantitative aspect. Okay, so typical numbers, 1 to 5. It's easy to draw up descriptive statistics on that. Then embedded in that, I've got a qualitative aspect of my questionnaire where I ask the participants, why do you react the way you did? And that's the power. That's the cherry on top, which kind of gives me a little bit of a twist on what I've found. So, and that's kind of embedded in each of the aspects of this research study. Okay, and then gathering. So my questionnaire was divided into 6 specific sections, each having their own quantitative and qualitative questions, except the 6th section, which I'll get to. Okay, so socio-demographic, that's pretty easy. It's just, okay, are you male, female, that kind of stuff. Are you from Nature's Valley? Are you Afrikaans or English? The next, liking, pretty straightforward. Do the participants of the study, do they like frogs? Do they not like frogs? Encounters, on a frequency level, how many times a year do you encounter frogs? What do you do when you see the frogs? Just those kind of questions. Knowledge. In this, it's typical, do you know the difference between a frog or a toad? And another thing is recognition of frog species is also kind of considered to be knowledge of frogs. So, and another interesting dynamic of human perceptions towards frogs is the aesthetic appeal of a frog determines the conservation outcome of people towards frogs. So in this, I had 3 species of frogs, each ranging from pretty to ugly, and I asked the participants, how do you feel when you see this frog, and would you conserve it, and also do you recognize it? So that's also an aspect that I implemented in there. And South Africa being a very cultural rich country, it's a very good idea to include myths and folklore, cultural perspectives. This is things that's like, do frogs cause lightning? Or do you believe frogs cause lightning? Do frogs cause warts? Those typical things. It kind of ranges from light to extreme, where people believe when you find a frog in your house, it will visit you in your dreams and haunt you. That kind of stuff. People believe that. All right. And then the last section, childhood memories and the influence of parental figures on these beliefs that people have. So quite simply put, I asked the participants to qualitatively reveal to me, do you have any specific memory of your childhood that you have with frogs? And is there any specific memory of a parent that kind of told you about frogs that you'd like to share with me? Okay, and that's the design of this study. And when it comes to data analysis, my quantitative aspect was analyzed descriptively, basic means, standard deviations, the things you learn in matric maths, the things we all worry about. And then next is something called an ANOVA, or an analysis of variance. And this takes the 3 clusters that I have, which is Nature's Valley, Kirland, and Covey, and I see where's correlation in the answers. And typically when you analyze it, it would look something like this, where there would be correlation between, this is not an accurate depiction of what I found, it's just for visual purposes. Is there correlation between Nature's Valley, Kirtland, or Covey, or all three of them or not? Okay, and then open and axial coding. This is for my qualitative analysis, where I take the word or the thematic responses of my participants, and I run it through, or I put codes to them that kind of gives me a picture of what the people. Usually, it's single words or very short phrases that I give to the overall answers of what the people give me. And this gives me then a picture of, okay, people associate frogs with snakes, associated with rain or bad omen, that kind of stuff. Okay, and then the results. Univariate statistics, just a fancy word for descriptive stats. Okay, so when it comes to liking, there's pretty good correlation to literature. The participants that participated in the study don't like frogs, with an exception to Nature's Valley, which is, as you can see, very high, which I'm very happy to see. But when it comes to Covey and Kirtland, it's pretty low, and the average, just above average, but that's because of Nature's Valley. Encounters, people, because this is such a biodiverse rich area, people encounter frogs pretty frequently. Knowledge, so people have kind of, we don't really know if people know about frogs or not. Myths and cultural beliefs, surprisingly not too much, in spite of being in South Africa, which previous studies have found to have these type of studies to prove that people have very high cultural beliefs towards frogs. There's not that much in this area. And then reaction to frogs. So this is the 3 species that I used. I can maybe just jump back to my other studies or to my other pictures. So I showed people a picture of basically, it's just a bit slow, but the breviceps or the rain frog. I showed them a picture of the Knysna leaf-folding frog, and I showed them a picture of the painted reed frog. And then I asked them to react or to give me a reaction a certain way and what their intentions are. And what I found is true to what literature is saying. The painted reed frog, which is very colorful, big eyes, is pretty cute. People like it and they want to conserve it. The breviceps or the rain frog, on the other hand, it looks very ugly. People say it looks hard like a rock and big, and they're scared of it. They don't like it. And the Knysna leaf-folding frog, which is kind of in between, it's not colorful, it's got snake-like eyes, but the big eyes make it kind of look cute for some people. It's somewhere in the middle. It's exactly what we expected. And recognition, people don't recognize these frogs. Some people do, other people are not too sure. So what I found in this study is, when taking a look at the deeper results of my analysis, I found that there's strong correlation between the knowledge of people, how they encounter frogs, and the liking they have towards frogs. So, and this is an important thing to take into consideration when you want to move forward, is that if we want people to have a behavioral change towards frogs, it's a good idea to do it through physical contact, kind of encountering what a frog is, touching it, looking at it, and and that's just how it is. But then there's a second thing that we need to take into consideration is, what do the people say? And that's where the qualitative results came into I want to say, struggling with the words, to kind of change the course, is yes, people don't know a lot about frogs, but they don't want to learn about frogs. And that's important, because now all of a sudden, okay, we know that people we can do behavioral changes for the benefit of frogs, but now if we put a frog in front of someone, they're going to, I don't like this, right? So this is important to take into consideration when we want to start making moves. So in other words, the behavioral changes that we want to take, I call it the long way around. We can't go straight to the point teaching people about frogs, because they quite frankly don't like it. Thankfully, Nature's Valley that's not the case with Nature's Valley. You people love frogs, and I'm very happy for that. But when it comes to Covey and Kirtland, there's certain things that we need to overcome first. People don't like seeing frogs. They think where there a frog is, there's a snake, which is true, but that scares them very much. Okay, so for the benefit of frog conservation, it's a very good idea to take an environmental approach first. Kind of, can we increase a person's connectedness to nature for the benefit of nature? Another thing to take into consideration that I found very interesting when looking at the childhood memories and the influence of parental beliefs on frogs is that most participants, almost everyone, had a very positive memory of frogs when they were little. But somehow, everyone, specifically Kobe and Curlin, they don't like frogs, which is very strange. So but one can say that parental figures do have an influence, but what I'm suggesting is that there's something else, and it's called the value of what others value. And that's quite frankly just fitting into society. So I grew up liking frogs, but as I get older, I realize people don't like frogs. I want to be like my peers, and that influences later how I react to frogs. Okay, and that's basically your typical high school struggle. All right. So next, and that's what I found with my social study. Very important findings to take into consideration when approaching behavioral change for the benefit of conservation, right? Okay, so diversity in South Africa. So we have 177 species that is spread across 12 families. Of these 177 species, just about half of them, maybe a little bit less, 55 of them only occurs in our borders. They're endemic, which is special, very special. And when taking our country's topography into consideration, knowing that from the west to the east, it goes drier to wet, and from south to north, it's wet to dry, that influences the distribution of frogs. And the distribution runs as follows. On your east side, which is in KwaZulu-Natal, you have a very high species count, but very low endemicity. In other words, you'll get buckets and buckets full of different species, but you'll find that over a large stretch of land. When you move to the Western Cape or to the Fynbos area, you'll find a lot of species, or not nearly as much as in Natal, but you'll find a lot of species, but very specific habitat requirements. Like the Table Mountain ghost frog occurs in one stream on Table Mountain. So just to give you an indication, that's just another indication natural of the niche specificity that frogs have. Not because of people, it's natural distribution. Okay, so these are the 12 families that we have. Okay, I'm not going to go too much in that. But, all right. So now that we go into the diversity of nature's valley, this is my second study. When evaluating literature, I realized that there is almost no studies done in Nature's Valley regarding frog diversity. There's one in 1987, which was just a general herpetology species count to see what lizards and frogs occur here. The other one is the Atlas Red Data Book of IUCN in 2004, I think it was. Yeah, it's there at the bottom. Which wasn't even such an in-depth study, taking quarter-degree grid cells into consideration, some advanced satellite analysis kind of stuff that they did, and just got a general list of what could occur here, but not very fine to detail. And then finally, for the last one, the piece of literature, which is again not focused on the area, it's just a general frog type of study, is just a plan for conservation, and some of those frogs occur in the area, and sometimes they refer, okay, in Nature's Valley, this frog is there. And this is important because as of recently, EWT regarded this area as a biodiversity hotspot and lacking data for that. So the idea is to obviously contribute to that. But the significance of this, it's very important, but for now, it's very good to know for people like Sandparks, for Nature's Valley Trust, to be able to do something about this in the long run, in case this list changes. Okay, so the methods that I use to establish my biodiversity list is visual encounter surveys, basically just coming up to a stream with my little torchy and looking for frog species and writing them down. Passive acoustic monitoring, I talked about that a little bit earlier. Just putting a passive acoustic monitor into the field, letting it run for a certain amount of time, and then taking that data and analyzing it. So specifically for my study, the idea is that I let it run for just over a year. And then the design of my recording, you kind of underestimate how much data it is. But just by running my recorder for 15 minutes per hour, per day, for 1 year, from 4 different song meters, I'll have 280 terabytes. Okay, that's 218,000 gigabytes. That's 218 million megabytes. Okay, that's a lot, and I have to go through that. Okay, so when it comes to data analysis, I spoke a little bit about it earlier. You take a software named Raven Pro. We've got other software like Kaleidoscope or I don't know much else, and you just import your data. I'm going to run a recognition software which is artificial intelligence based. Just because we're moving in that direction, it's a very good idea to get myself involved with that. And basically turning that spectrogram, which is a visual set of data, into nominal data, and I can run that statistically, and I'll get my list. And from that, I can also include metadata, such as, okay, my song meter was in this kind of habitat, this kind of weather was recorded over this type of, or this time, and I'm able to produce very interesting data in terms of call activity in your specific habitats, in certain weather conditions, and a certain time of year. Okay, so what I've found so far, the study is not done yet, and there's lots of potential still to find more things. 7 families of the 12 we can find here. Okay, I'll kind of show an example picture of each. You guys can just look over the word and just nod your head. Okay, 13 genera. Okay, this is just your nomenclature of your species name. It's your genera and then your species. So 13 genera, and then 12 species in total. 21 species in total. This is my prediction. So far I've found, I think, 15. So we're getting there. But this just, again, is just the importance of this study. We think there's 21. We've got a very good idea that there's 21. But taking climate change into consideration, human pressures, that changes. Okay, this is just the list. And then, did I put it in? I did, okay. It's just a little bit later. I'll get back to that. Okay, so this is just an example of the species that we can find. Okay, Cacosternum nunum. This is a bronze dainty frog. Your Strongylopus species. This is just one example. The striped stream frog. This guy's about this big. They're not very big. Okay, Tomopterna. Your sand frogs. Okay, your Fondycophrynus. This is habitat specialist toads. Kind of not typical toads. Okay, Amitia, your river frogs, Hyperoleus, painted reed frog, your Hyperoleus horstocki or your arum lily frog, also your Afrixilla species, your leaf folders fall in this category. Semnodactylus or I can't remember, but your bubbling cassina is also kind of in this form. So this is the rattling frog. Okay, Breviceps or rain frogs. We only get one here, I think. Well, I've got an expectation of 2. Okay, your typical toads. This is your raucous toad, and they're pretty good looking here. If you go up to the north, they're very ugly, but I'm proud of them over here. Okay, your ghost frogs. I'm still looking for this guy. They are very elusive. Okay, and then your leaf folder frog. I can probably just have you guys admire him for a bit because this guy's endangered. Okay. And then your Xenopus, your typical clawed frogs. We've got a bunch of them in South Africa, but here we've only got the Xenopus levis. Okay. And then your dwarf toads, your Kopinsi bufo or toadlets. Okay. So I'm also expecting to find this one here. I might have heard him in the beginning of the year, so I'll see what comes up next. In the next season. Okay. So outcomes, I kind of elaborated a little bit on this. So this would just give us your species list, what occurs here, what doesn't. That's already valuable. But what's more valuable is how does the species list differ when you look at your fynbos habitats to more specific or more kind of finer detailed microhabitats to the larger picture, such as fynbos versus forest versus habitat or degraded habitats such as grasslands or farm dams, those kind of stuff. And this in the long picture, in the long run, when we have enough data, we can see the trends, how it changes as climate change becomes a bigger issue, or when such things start to change for the better. Okay, and then the final study, we get through this. The final study is on the endangered species. So here it's still pretty much underway. It's almost coming to an end. The data collection has been going very well, fortunately. Here I'll talk a little bit about the reproductive biology, the tadpole description through a process known as Knysna staging, and then call behaviors and sound structure. Okay, so what we know about the species is very little. Before 2019, the general scientific community regarded the species as very similar to the Natal leaf-folding frog. They do look very similar. Their calls are very similar. Their reproductive biology is also very similar. So it was widely thought that this is just a range extension of that species. 2019, Ferdi de Lange came along. He did his master's on that. And he described the species in full, kind of just the fine changes or differences between the Natal leaf-folding frog and this leaf folder. And he focused also on a little bit about the typical tadpole description and the call analysis. So we now know for certain the species is its own. Okay, so we also know it's endangered. Its distribution is confined between George and Covey, and we know for certain of only 7 sites where they occur. Nature's Valley has a few of them. I've bumped that up, those 7 sites to 9 known sites, which is good. And we also know that when it comes to reproductive biology, very specific circumstance or environment is needed. Invasive species, plant species can play a very important role to this because they only utilize specific plant types when folding their leaves. And as we know, it's very, very understudied. Okay. So this is basically the only 2 literature that occurs. A little bit more there's a little bit more in field guides, older literature which is not really that much relevant anymore, but things from the 60s, papers from the 60s also exist, but very limited. So, and obviously my purpose of this is to widen that a little bit. Okay, so understanding the development, this is important because when you kind of jump between species and you look at, for example, the Table Mountain ghost frog, they are under pressure because their tadpoles require crystal clear water. The finest bit of sedimentation from landslides or people that pour or wash their bowls up top in the mountain where their oats was for their hike, that kind of stuff, it affects the tadpole development critically. And that's why it's important to know why or how the species develops when it's in a tadpole form, because that can contribute significantly to its conservation, and it's good to know. And then contribution to literature, just widening the papers that people are able to use, and then help to conserve through that. Okay, I just want to talk a little about of what I've found so far. So in terms of tadpole development, I've got 2 controls. I've got 2 big buckets. I'm pretty sure most of you have seen it in the film Martin Park. You guys are welcome to stand there and look at it. Just please don't interact with anything. But you'll see that 2 buckets are covered with like a camp net. 2 buckets are not. So that's just near natural and a not natural system. The not natural system is without predators. There's some vegetation in it. And then the near natural, there's plenty of vegetation, there's predators. And the idea is to see what pressures their development. Are they pressured to develop quicker in a natural system where there's predators or not? And Knysna staging, quite frankly, just looks at the length of the tadpole. Does it have appendages already? Does it not? The width of the tail, etc. It's pretty boring stuff, actually. And then the second part, when it comes to the call classification and description. So we know that the species has 3 types of calls. I'm sorry, I'm not going to imitate them. We've got 3 types of calls. The one call is its typical, just very typical advertisement call. The male sits on a leaf or in the water and calls and attracts a mate. The second call kind of establishes that he's there. He does these short bursts of like chirp chirp sounds, and that's just telling everyone, okay, I'm here, I'm going to call, just listen up. And then the third call, which I found, when was it? Tuesday night, successfully recorded it and witnessed or observed behavior with that, is like a quark sound almost, but very, very fine and high pitched. And this happens when 2 males are in close proximity to each other and they're kind of telling each other, back off, this is my spot. Okay, so fortunately that's out of the way and I can continue with that. So just keep your eyes open if you want to read more a bit about that. That's going to come soon. Okay, so how can you help? All right. So fortunately, most of you are from Nature's Valley, okay? And that helps because Nature's Valley likes frogs. You guys are doing it right so far. You guys have ponds in your backgrounds, in your backyards. You guys don't kill frogs when you see them. When you find a toad in your house, you take it outside and put it in your pond, that kind of stuff. That's helping a lot already. But when it comes to people that need to hear what they have to do, that's people like Covey and Kurland. Quite frankly, they persecute frogs in the sense they find a frog, they take it outside, and they sprinkle it with salt and leave it upside down, and then they think, okay, it's going to rain. It's that kind of stuff. So how one person can help, it's very difficult to tell them not to do that. Because once you start telling people that your belief is wrong, things start getting spicy. Right, so it's very, very tricky. And from a citizen science perspective, all that you can do is just help the scientific community in terms of data, citizen science, if you can financially, spread the word, that kind of stuff. So Nature's Valley, thank you so much for doing that. You guys are stars. And that's pretty much me. So that's my talk.